Hello and welcome to the podcast. I have a real treat for you today. I have one of the legends of American cycling. I have Andy Hampston on the podcast today. Andy was part of the legendary 7-Eleven cycling team, really the first American cycling team to get some real money and break into the game in the European circuit in the mid-'80s. And of course, in 1986, Greg LeMond wins his first Tour de France, really putting American cycling on the map. But people really don't know that a month before that, in 1986, Andy Hampston is really the first American to win a major European stage race. That is the Tour of Switzerland. Hampston went on to get fourth place in that 1986 Tour, while serving a supporting role for Greg LeMond in his victory. He also got fourth place in the 1992 Tour de France and won the coveted mountain stage, the Alpe d'Huez stage, in 1992. But Hampston is probably best known for his famous win in the 1988 Giro d'Italia in epic fashion, winning two stages and fighting through terrible conditions in freezing cold over the infamous Gavia Pass. So really from humble beginnings in Grand Forks, North Dakota, Andy grew up riding bikes, doing a lot of racing around the Midwest, working his way up through the ranks, and finally busting into the European peloton. So really Andy is a model for true grit and love of the sport. It was really my pleasure to talk today with Andy Hampston. I want to start with your beginnings, like your roots in cycling. Like, how did you get started? Where were you at? Like, were there people that you met, like mentors? Like, how did you get into cycling?
I grew up in Grand Forks, North Dakota in the 70s when bicycles were pretty much invented. Actually, 10 speeds became popular in the early 70s, and by the mid 70s, they arrived in North Dakota. But there was a great bike shop called Nomad Bike Shop. There was one in Fargo and one in my town of Grand Forks. And they were great. They just showed me how to draft and tag along and eat something now and then so they wouldn't drop me far from home. But they were really nice. And some races were happening then. I think my first race was in 1975 when I must have been 13 or so. And I got third. And my best friend, Peter O'Kelly, was second. And my brother, Steve, was first. And nobody was fourth or fifth or anything. But it was fun. I love riding my bike. I do a little bit of bike touring, like 3 or 4 nights away just to go try to find hills. I guess I would race the next few years 2 or 3 times a year. There just weren't many races around North Dakota and Minnesota. So when I was 16, I traveled with a great friend who was a few years older than me. I guess I was a junior and he was a senior by that point, racers. But his sister lived in Madison, Wisconsin, and she was leaving her apartment for 6 weeks. So we were welcome to go crash there. And we raced every weekend. We had a blast, met a whole bunch of other cool kids and families of racers. Invited myself that winter to come back to Madison to stay with the Cochran family that were close friends of Rick Droster.
Yeah.
And the rest, as they say, was history once I met Rick Droster.
Yeah, so Madison, Wisconsin, I'm glad you brought that up. That's where I really started doing a lot of racing too. And that was really a hotbed of cycling at the time.
It was the greatest place on the planet in the late 70s. I mean, I don't know, maybe Berkeley or New Jersey had more races.
Yeah.
But great racers there. People would even talk about training other than just riding to Paoli and back twice a week. It was great. It was super fun working there. And, I didn't have a car. Mm-hmm. I had to earn money either in a bike shop or prize money. Yeah. So that was a big, hunger's a good motivation. Yeah. And they were just really fun people to hang out with and travel with.
Yeah. Now, it seems really important in listening to your story there of being in the right environment for development. You go to Madison, Wisconsin, you discover this community, and it seems to me that that's super important, and that any athlete coming up, they could maybe not have that nurturing environment, and maybe not have been pushed by people or learned these little tricks or gotten like, hey, Andy, you're really good. You should go to this race. Like, how important do you think that is for an athlete coming up to have that, really like a nurturing environment?
Yeah, I think I know what you mean, because I compare it often. I live in Italy now, and live in Boulder, Colorado part-time too, but really like going back and forth. Part of what I tell Italians who are sometimes dumbfounded that I was able to win their national tour coming from such a cycling backwater as the United States was everyone here, their uncle was a pro. Their big sister cleans their room. It's always a boy that does at least in my generation. Yeah. The boys are babied if they're athletes, whether it's any sport, certainly soccer and cycling. Don't lift a finger. Don't worry about school. You're going to make all sorts of money as a bike racer. And they become trapped because from the age of 10 or 15 or whenever they became good, there's this road that you take athletes down, and there's just a huge fear because they realize when they're in their mid-20s, they don't have anything else. Well, it was hard to find a ride on the, I don't know how I got from Grand Forks to Madison. It was hard to do. I had to make friends. I had to be nice. I had to help with gas money. Yeah. Socially, I needed to learn some skills. I was really shy when I was a kid. But now I tell my Italian friends it really helped me, because when I turned pro, when you think everything's easier, it's actually much harder. You have teammates, a great car, mechanics take care of your bike, but it's so demanding. There's so many decisions to be made and so much stress to deal with that I feel that if I had an easier road getting that professional ticket, I don't know if I would have been as good when I got there.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like in the United States at the time, it wasn't, and still isn't, a major sport. So that if you loved it, you had to really dedicate yourself and, ask for rides. And it was the barriers. It's kind of like if you really want it, you'll get it. Whereas in Italy, like you're telling me, there's this, so much tradition and so much support that it's like, you could be pushed maybe by parents or by a community, and you may not even really have the talent because it's like everyone's just so enthusiastic. Hey, your uncle raced, like you're going to race next. Like, I see what you're saying about, the environment of kind of like a Darwinian kind of thing, if you're, I want to ask you, in terms of, times where you felt like maybe even quitting the sport, was there any other moments in your cycling career where it was, my God, this is so hard, I'm not sure if this is worth it? Moments like that where you had to kind of just step through the fire and go, or with faith, and go, I'm just going to keep going anyway. You
mean for longer than the 5 or 6 hours of the racing? Because that is
more like a career thing. Like I'm having doubts about my career, like this is tough. Like
I think I get it, because every race I think, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this?
Sure.
But along the way, there are little situations like that really wet, cold, early season of 1986. I just remember shivering, just being so cold and miserable, and obviously thinking of quitting, but trying to deal with, well, how am I not going to, if I get any colder, I might fall off my bike on some of these rainy descents with just sort of wet snow on the sides of the road in Spain. And I remember shaking so badly, thinking, well, I'm going to crash, and I'm so cold that I really don't care. Yeah. But that's not, I really don't want to crash. And I thought, well, let go, put your fingers around the bars. You're faking, therefore you're shaking the bike, let the bike go on its own. And I thought, well, this is absolutely preposterous. Like, it's way too cold to race. Yesterday, if it was snowy at the tops, if the race couldn't go, they canceled the previous stage, or they shortened the mountaintop finish or something. It was as cold and wet as things could be. Yeah. So just little things like that, like don't let yourself fall off the bike to quit. keep going. And there was a silly book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy that I read in that period, where it talked about when the hero was in danger, he had special glasses that would turn pitch black so he couldn't see how dangerous things were. It's just best not to know. So I tried to apply that. You know, if a downhill, you know, as soon as we go uphill, I can pedal hard and warm up a little bit. So it's really the downhills or the flats or the crosswinds that were the most challenging moments. And I guess another part of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is he always keeps going to see what the hell is next, because this is so bad. Like, he's almost dead, even with his glasses on, that no, he's quitting because he's curious to see how this could possibly get any worse. So I tried to adapt that attitude too, you know, and then it's 50 Ks to go and 30 Ks to go. And, you know, I could limp in on those days, many of those days being the coldest, most miserable I'd been on a bike. But I got to the point where instead of, I guess it might sound like I'm building myself up, that I'm some super tough guy. I just accepted if things are going to be so bad that I couldn't actually ride my bike. If I'm so cold, I just figure my body will shut, you know, I'll fall over, you know, it'll be all right. I've got all these clothes on. I won't, you know, that's the point. And at that point, I'm not disappointing myself or my team or anyone else that I might be accepting pressure from. It is, I physically can't go any further. But until that happens, I can grumble, I can pick up grumbling and bitching and all these new languages, but I'm going to keep going until that point happens. And, you know, usually the finish line would come, or the sun would come out, or, you know, getting a breakaway and be able to pull and get warm or go uphill, you know, something would change that I could make it to the end of the race.
Yeah. No, I think that's it, right? It's just keep going, right? I mean, as simple as that is, if you're suffering and you feel like quitting and you're saying to yourself, this is ridiculous. Like, this is what I do to get paid. This is my profession. Like, I'm suffering. But like you said, you just keep going, and one more kilometer, keep going, keep going, keep going. And I think that is, as simple as that is, I think that's really one of the keys to, you know, in your event and even in your career, just keep going, right? Because the worst that could happen is like, yeah, you can't physically continue. I want to segue now into 1986, where you are actually recruited to the Vie Claire team, which is, you know, his big team. Le Mans was on it, and that was the year that Le Mans won the Tour de France. But I just want to tell the viewers and listeners there what you did in '86, because it's super impressive. You win the Tour of Switzerland in June, leading into the Tour de France. And this is your debut Tour de France, right? So you're doing the biggest race in the world for the very first time. You end up getting 4th overall, which is phenomenal. The best young rider jersey. I think you were 24 at the time, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that is just such a huge breakthrough for you, and again for American cycling, that, you know, you win the Tour of Switzerland. How was your confidence coming into the Tour of Switzerland? Did you think that you could win it from the get-go?
No, I was just trying to make the tour team. I didn't feel very prepared. So going to the Tour of Switzerland, I really liked my 2 Swiss teammates, Guido Winterberg and Nicky Reutemann. And I show up at our little hotel. It's a guest house in Winter Tour, I remember. I'm pretty sure it was Winter Tour. And they, oh, Andy, you know, good to see you. How's it going? We have to speak French. And Guido's French is worse than mine, but we really want to understand each other. And they're at the bar drinking beers. Wow, this is pretty relaxed. You know, I don't drink. It's gonna, you know, ruin my heat tolerance for these cold races. They say, oh, Andy, come have a drink. No, you know, I can't. We've got the prologue tomorrow. Just come and, you know, it's shandy. It's half lemonade and half, you know, it's barely any beer. So I'm like, what else? You guys know what you're doing. Have a little shandy, and just could feel myself relax, like accepting this taboo of never touching alcohol because it might slow my body down. And the next day there's the prologue, and it's a pretty hard, I think it's 8 or 9 kilometers, and it's a loop, and it goes up, I don't know, climbs out of the village and goes over a hill. I don't know if it climbs 80 meters or 100 meters. I think it's big ring or maybe small ring, but you know, it's not a wall. Yeah. And a little bit tricky down, you know, fast. I brake for some of the corners. Maybe I didn't need to. And I'm racing pretty early, but we have Charlie Berard on the team, goes very early and sets the fastest time. And so then when the car follows me, he's telling me, hey, you know, you're 5 seconds up on Charlie. You're 8 seconds up on Charlie. You're 15 seconds up on Charlie, you know, at the top. Yeah. So then I bomb the descent, that, you know, just don't blow it, stop braking, you know, just the whole, who knows what. Sorry, I have the fastest time, but there's still 70% of the peloton to race. Right. And I'm so excited, but I'm smart. There's no way I'm going to sit, you know, there's only the car to sit in. There's no way I'm going to wait hours with all these superstars and Hinault and Le Mans. You know, I'm a pro now. I'm going to do a warm down ride, go to the hotel, shower up. It's on TV. Come out of the shower and, you know, guys are going and, you know, and I recognize these names now and, you know, I'm still leading it. There's still 40 guys to go, but I don't know. I put on my sweats and I ride 5Ks back to the finish. And at that point, it's like, how am I doing? Where have you been? Well, I went and took a shower. Well, you're leading. Yeah, but come on. And then a few minutes later, Le Mans finishes. Didn't beat me.
Wow.
And he's second.
Wow.
Yeah. You know, and then Hinault finishes, you know, 20 minutes later, and I'm still winning. So I go on the podium, I'm in my sweats. I just, sorry. But Hinault was so excited that I won. And he was so excited to help me. I lost it in an uphill time trial a couple of days later. And he's like, yes, now we get to attack. You know, I'll go, and then Greg goes, and, you know, we're going to crush this poor kid that won the time trial. Yeah. And we did.
Nice.
Totally did. But he didn't want to just defend the race. There were all sorts of attacks going, but he really focused on helping me win the race. You know, when it was raining and I was cold, he would come find me and give me an armchair ride to the finish. And that's something when I helped him in the spring at races in Spain, he really showed me how he wanted to be out away from all the other riders when I was pulling him to the front. Yeah. He didn't take big risks on downhill. And he showed me in the races how he liked to have his help. So him giving, that back to me was his way of teaching, but I thought a very generous way of mentoring someone by actually giving them a race, helping them to a race with me.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's that just having one of the greatest cyclists of all time, Bernard, you know, like be excited about you leading. Seems like it really just validated things. Okay, like sure you had the fastest time. You're like, well, there's going to be more riders getting fast. I'm going back to the hotel. You know, probably not that good. But then validated by the actual time, and then also the enthusiasm of, say, and then the team. And that must have been really, talking about nurturing environments. It sounded like La Vie Claire had that attitude, or especially with Hinault and Le Mans, of like, Andy, you're doing great. We're supporting you. We're all there.
Yeah, but it was more Hinault than Le Mans.
Okay.
Hinault, he would attack because as we know from the Tour de France, the tactic has to be aggressive. No protecting a lead. You can go help someone out to stay in the peloton, but they were the next day they were attacking to get in the lead because that's how we race. Yeah. But I think it was really after the time trial, there's some fireworks in the earlier stages, but it would always come back together. But I was second in the time trial, but another really good Swiss kid beat me.
Yeah.
It was he was just so happy that we didn't have the lead because it meant we get to attack
Right.
to get it back.
Yeah.
And Greg didn't really like that. He was more calculating, let's wait for the big stage and let's just get ahead. While Hinault just wanted to destroy everyone all the time.
Wow. That's
fun mentorship.
Yeah, I mean that's what I remember about his style of just very aggressive, and was that something new for you to be exposed to that kind of an attitude of like always on the offense?
Yeah, because as an amateur, on Levi's Raleigh, we were the second team. We didn't have a sprinter that could beat Davis. We didn't have someone stronger than Ron Kiefel. We were always calculating and trying to get in a break and, usually getting clobbered by the stronger team.
Yeah.
And personally, as a rider, I was never the strongest. I might be the fastest on a climb, but my stamina in a big race, there was always someone, when I was an amateur, there's always someone stronger than me. So I couldn't rely on brute strength.
Yeah.
And it took me years of training and racing, to be able to throw the punches in the longer stages.
Yeah.
So, I was timid as a rider. I'd run out of energy. Sometimes I was faster, but I remember races just bridging a 2-minute gap on a climb thinking I'm Superman, and then I can't pedal to the finish because I just burned up all my energy.
Yeah.
So I had to change my style of racing. So it was fascinating to sort of have the talent to go fast with that team, but not having the super stamina, but being a cog in their machine of doing constant attacks and having fun. We don't have to win the race. We just have to attack.
Yeah.
It was fun.
I love that. That's a great story. So Andy, I want to, there's again so much to talk about. I want to, we could talk about the 86 Tour de France and the drama there, but that's more of a Le Mans story. I want to skip ahead to 1988 was the big year. And this is what you're known for. This is what you're famous for. I showed you this before our interview. I have the winning magazine here. Of that year, 1988 Tour of Italy. And so this is 1988, you're on the 7-Eleven cycling team. You've demonstrated that you're a major tour winner. You got fourth in the Tour de France. Like, it was clearly what was the plan from the get-go in 1988 with 7-Eleven that you were going to win the Giro that year? Was that the plan?
Alcola and I were going hunting. We had Davis, we had people to go for stages, but Raul Alcala was on the team and he won the mountain stage of a warm-up race, the Tour of Trentino, like super form.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, we have two great captains. If we all fall flat on our faces, it's okay because we have the Tour later. But what I had raced with 7-Eleven the previous 2 years were smaller races, kind of avoiding the Giro, with the idea that I needed a 3-week race is probably my strength, but you have to take it easy. Or if it's 23 days of racing, there's only 3 or 4 that I can tear it up. So it's physiologically and psychologically, it's kind of hard holding a racehorse back.
Right.
On these flat stages, just sit in. You get in this negative little trap. So I hadn't done a grand tour other than the Tour de France, which was my primary goal, until 1988.
So then, okay, we're in the Tour of Italy, 1988. You're coming into it. I want to read, Andy. There's actually a quote in this Winning Bicycle Racing Illustrated magazine from September of 1988. I'm a nerd. I collect magazines, and there's actually you're interviewed before the Tour of Italy by the press, and you say, "I will be a contender in this Giro. The winner will have to be a good climber. I'll attack in the mountains." So you're declaring this, I'll attack in the mountains. I have a lot of endurance and a strong team. The important thing will be not to lose precious seconds in the time trials where I'm less sure of my abilities. So you're very transparent about your intentions. And I'm not sure, do you remember saying that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Italians always did, Italian athletes,
Yeah.
Boone, says, oh, so-and-so is going to win. They always deflect. And we actually, the day before the prologue, there's a press show on live TV where all the teams were lined up. Some theater, I forget where, it's always something spectacular. In front, they put the captain of each team, and the announcer interviews all of them, and they always deflect. So-and-so, I had a cold last week, I'm not going to do anything. Yeah. And Raul Alcala was our captain. So, and we're the last team to be interviewed. We're such a footnote, even though it's not the first time we've raced in the Giro. And he just stands up and says, Andy's going to win.
Nice.
All of us stand up, yeah, bro. And some of the journalists, they didn't really, they weren't used to that American braggart way of doing business, but we were there to win because there hadn't been mountainous GD for a lot of years because Moser, they were flattened out for Moser, especially in 1985. And now he's on the race direction committee. So he's throwing in all these mountains they've been avoiding all these years. Yeah. And there's one, the Gavia mountain. There's the Stelvio's in there, but there's one called the Gavia that hasn't been raced since 1961. Okay. And Johnny Mota, who won, fact check me on this, but he won the 66 Giro. But he and I both love Volkswagen Bugs. I met him in Italy. We're buddies. Yeah. He comes to me and says, Andy, you're going to win this race, and you're going to do it on the Gavia. Wow. I'm like, oh, Johnny, that's really nice of you. You're so unkind to me. Oh, cut the bullshit. I like you, but every Italian director and racer that I talk to about the Gavia, they tell me the same bullshit. They say it's just another mountain. Yeah. We have these miracle bikes with 8 speeds now, and they only weigh 20 pounds. Right. It's like just all the mountains are the same. It's like just focus on that one day. Yeah. And I thought, whoa. And then Mike Neal, super smart director. Yeah. He's like, he's right. He's right there. He's right. Everyone's worried about the Stelvio. There's a week to go. It's not the first mountain stage. Yeah. But it's not a long day. There's a second category or first or second category climb before it. But, sometimes the shorter days are more cute. They make a huger, if you have a bad day, it's even worse. Right. So I've been focusing on that day. I'd had it in mind all along.
So let's cut to the Gavia. That was the stage, and I had never known that Gianni Motta basically was prescient like that. Like, you're going to win, and this is the stage.
He's so un-Italian.
that I had never known that. That's pretty cool. So let's cut to the chase here. So it is basically you had already won stage 12, I believe, in that year's Giro coming in. You're clearly a favorite, and it is the morning of the 14th stage, and that's the Gavia Pass, right? And I actually was listening to a podcast by Bob Roll, your former teammate on 7-Eleven, talking about that particular morning. And it was cold, it was rainy, and you knew that it was going to be a tough stage. I mean, you live in Colorado, you know what it's like to train in the mountains and hit snow, and you were really prepared. You knew it was going to be epic. And I remember reading about this way back in the day of how many riders didn't take that stage that seriously. They were thinking like, well, might warm up, kind of being hopeful. And there was even one rider, I think, who was leading that stage. I forget who it was. But he was like going up the Gavia Pass in just his jersey and shorts.
Oh yeah, Johan van de Velde.
Van de Velde, right. And I was thinking like how, and it's snowing, and I'm like, I remember watching this on TV and like, what's this guy thinking, right? But you were on the start, and you knew that you had to be really prepared. What did you do to be prepared for that epic stage? Just some of like the stuff that you did to prepare for that.
Well, I was on the right team.
Yeah.
We had a great team meeting.
Yeah.
The race was delayed as the teams and the race directors met and talked to road crews who said, no, the road's, it's slushy. It's not icy. We've been clearing the road. The sun was hitting it yesterday. We'll run a snowplow 10 minutes before the boys come. But the weather we were riding into the storm. We were going towards the north.
Right.
We knew the descent would be worse than the climb. So we had, there are two vehicles that follow each team. Mm-hmm. So one would be behind the first rider, and one gets to do whatever it wants to service the other riders. But we wanted every rider to know we were racing for the 25-kilometer descent instead of racing for the peak of the Gavia, which I'd been thinking of the whole race. Now our team tactic was to go 95% on the uphill, to have enough left to, no use gaining seconds on the uphill to lose minutes on a downhill.
Right.
So every rider prepared a musette bag of clothing that would be 1 kilometer before the top. Jim Ockwitz, the team manager, would have everyone's clothes in a bag near the top. I knew that, I had most of my clothes in the follow car, but everyone on the team knew, especially if they're not in the first group, they can stop, put on all sorts of warm clothes, put on a winter parka if you want, coast 25 kilometers down to Bormio, just make it in the time limit. But we knew that the weather multiplied by the downhill freezing kilometers was the real factor of the race. So we each prepared clothing for it. We had hot tea. We had all sorts. I was getting hot tea every 5 kilometers on the approach. We had a soignier 3 kilometers from the top with a thermos with super hot, just sweet, wonderful hot tea and bottles for everyone. We had the race gear. So I had my team lead me out to the bottom. There's a breakaway of about 10 riders, with Johan van de Velde being the best one, but we didn't have the lead. I think I was in 4th place at this point. And as you pointed out, I won an uphill finish 2 days before. I'm flying. Like, I figure, oh, good, this is finally, I feel like I want to feel. I can't wait to get really fit. It's probably at, one of the highest points of fitness in my life. And we just had my team lead me out to the bottom. We didn't need to drop anyone, but from Ponte de Legno, the last town, there's about 5 or 6 kilometers of 6 to 8% climbing. I'd never seen the climb, but Massimo Testa lived in the area, and he would go, in the summer, he had driven it a lot when he was growing up in the area. And he told me it would be the last 14 kilometers, the road would narrow down, turn to dirt, 1-lane dirt road, and it'll be 14%. It might be more like 12 kilometers to the top. And then the road, it's so narrow that there's little dig outs, little places for one car to pull over, where they could dig it out in the mountain, and then another car would pass. And it wasn't all rocky. It's mostly pasture land. And I've been back in the summer all sorts of times. Now I know the climb quite well. But I just thought, everyone's looking at me. I won 2 days before. This is the stage. There's no sneak attacking. Just told my team, bring me to the front. Came around this curve. I knew we'd go from 2 lanes to 1 lane on a left-hand curve. I just punched it. I thought, I'm going to attack 3 times. It's really far to the top.
Yeah.
There's no drafting. It's about when the rain turned back to snow. It was bucketing rain and sleet all day long. I was freezing the minute I got on my bike with all sorts of clothing.
Wow.
I'd gotten rid of everything except for, I had a short sleeve wool jersey that was the combination jersey for the Giro with a sheer long sleeve polypro undershirt and no shoe covers, bare legs, but I kept my neoprene diving gloves on, knowing that if my fingers don't work, I can't put the warm clothes that are waiting for me at the top, I can't put them on. So I attacked, and I went 95%. No one could stick with me. They weren't far behind, but it's so steep, I could look down and see where I was 20 seconds ago. There's no way anyone can work together. You know, now it's 35 kilometers to go. So I tried to not go full speed all the way to the top. You know, I put a neck warmer and a wool hat on a couple kilometers from the top. I made the mistake because I remember I had 47 seconds on Eric Breukink, but I made the mistake at the top where it's snowing and it's blowing, of taking my rolled up rain jacket, plastic, hard plastic, and trying to put it on without, instead of stopping and putting it on in 15 seconds, I'm a pro. I have to put it on while I'm riding and I'm almost crashing. And Breukink caught me at that point. And I thought, well, this is great. I'll go over the top with him. He's from Holland. He must know how to ride in the snow. And he had no rain jacket.
Wow.
I thought, okay, he's going to be aerodynamic. I get it. But he wasn't confident in the snow. And the first 2 miles are pretty level. It doesn't start dropping right away. And when it drops, it's irregular, that it undulates. It'll be 3 left turns before you get to a right turn. It's a crazy little road until you get to the first village of Santa Caterina. And then it'll be I knew this from Max, it'll turn into a 2-lane road. And that's where the snow turned to rain. So I'm abbreviating this perhaps because it's hard to explain how hard it really was, but I knew my body temperature was going down. I saved my 5% effort, so I had enough energy. I ate quite a bit, and I had that hot tea. I made sure I got it in my body. I dropped Breukink on the downhill, but it was slushy snow, but on a gravel road, so it wasn't slick. But I kept turning one gear. I think it was the 53, probably 14. I never stopped pedaling, even though I wasn't pushing on it. And I kept feathering my brakes. And I know I didn't go really fast, but I don't think I went so slow for the road conditions. And then Breukink, who's very, very, very good, he caught and passed me right away. He caught me at 7Ks to go, but then I could use him as a rabbit all the way to the finish. And he won the stage. I was 7 or 10 seconds later. But third place was almost 5 minutes back, and the leader was 8 minutes back or so. So it was a very handy gap.
That is, I encourage people listening and watching this to watch that on YouTube. I wish the coverage, I was watching some videos on YouTube of that stage of the Gavia, and the way you're describing it is exactly how the video is, but you do have to see some of the images from that stage. It is just so epic and iconic of racing in the snow. And Andy, I just want to ask you real quick, I know you have to go pretty soon. Do you have time for a part 2, maybe another time?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So, maybe we could pause, because I think you said you had like 15 minutes left, and I think we're about there. So
I should leave in 1 minute.
Okay. All right. So let's pause on this and let's do a part 2, because there's so much more I want to ask you. Not just about the 88 Giro, but going into your transition into post sports and your brand, Cingale, and all this kind of stuff. So I'll let you go for now, and we'll do part 2 real soon.
Well, I hope you enjoyed my interview with Andy Hampston, one of the greatest American cyclists of all time. You're going to want to check out part 2. We talk about the 1992 Tour de France, where Andy gets 4th place. Also wins an epic stage on the Alpe d'Huez. We also talk about some more sports psychology and some advice for aspiring young pro cyclists. Andy also talks about his retirement from the sport and how athletes in general can do this gracefully. So listen to part 2, and you're going to get a lot more exciting stuff here with Andy Hampston. This is Michael Seeley's Sports Psychology Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.